Hello everyone and welcome to Penguin Powered Games. Today I wanted to start out a new series of Does It Play Well on Linux? I know a lot of people are interested in Linux. They're either already using it and they play games, or they're thinking about maybe jumping into the Linux operating system. Maybe you've seen it on YouTube, people switching over from Windows or whatnot and playing games. And so I didn't want to really use this series to review the game specifically, but how it actually plays on the Linux operating system. I'm going to do this with 7 criterias. Essentially, the first being installation and startup, number 2 performance, number 3 stability, number 4 online functionality, number 5 controller, keyboard, mouse, and input, number 6 being graphics, and the final one, number 7, being audio. So the first game that we're going to review on whether it plays well on Linux is Galactic Civilizations 4. For anyone who's interested, this is essentially what I'm reviewing on. I'm using the latest Fedora Linux 44 KDE Plasma desktop, so 6.7.2 with 7.014 kernel version, and I'm using Wayland as my graphics platform. So let's jump right into it. The first criteria is installation and startup. So essentially, is there any problems installing the game? Is there any problems starting it up? Do you have to do any tweaking or anything like that? So the game will launch on the latest version of Proton, which is 10.0-4. 10.0-4. It will launch with no issues starting up or anything like that. However, this is not a native Windows game, so you have to use that compatibility layer of Proton. And so once you get into the game, I noticed the keyboard, the inputs didn't seem to be registering. I could hit my num lock, that works. I could hit my caps lock, that works, but the actual key presses wasn't registering. And so what I did was roll back to version 9 of Proton, which is 9.0-4, and then it worked. And so after doing a little bit of research, I found out that the way that Proton 10 handles keyboard inputs is very different than Proton 9. It actually tries to take advantage of the Wayland display, and so it really helps when by reducing latency of input lag. However, it didn't seem to be working with Proton 10, and I could have been happy with working with Proton 9 and playing the game like that, but it really bugged me, and I wanted to see if I could figure out a better solution. And so I did. When you go to Manage and Properties, you can see here I'm using Proton 10.0-4. I had to put in the no launcher option. So what happens is if you launch it with no option, and I'll show you that, you'll get a Stardock launcher that comes up. Yeah, this. So what's happening is this is grabbing your key. Essentially, I think this is a bug with Wayland, but this will grab your keyboard input display or keyboard inputs, and it will hold them. It essentially hold them hostage, and so when the game actually launches, it doesn't register. So what you have to do is disable this from launching before the game launches. And once I did that, by just going to launch options / no launcher, then at that point, then I could put my Proton version to 10, and the game launches with Proton 10, and it registered keyboard's inputs, I don't have a problem with the launcher or anything like that. So there is a little bit of tweaking, I guess you could say, to get Proton 10 to work. And for that reason, I'm going to give this first criteria of installation and startup overall a 7. So the next one was performance. Performance, I honestly have no problem with it. The game plays perfect at 125 frames per second. That's the actual cap for the game. Of course, I am playing with a 9070 XT, but I'm sure you could play the game with a 9060 just fine, or if you're on NVIDIA, I'm sure you could play it with, what is it, a 5060 just fine. This is a 4X strategy game. You're not going to have a real big problem with lagginess or anything, so I didn't really notice any performance issues. So for performance, I give the overall rating a 10. Stability, the third criteria. So stability, I wanted to see if there's any type of crashes, any buffer overflows, any type of errors or anything that occurred. I've played for many hours. It's pretty much been rock solid stable. I haven't noticed any type of crashes or anything like that that would make me think that there's a stability issue. So for that reason, I give that score a 10 as well. The fourth criteria was online functionality. So this one is a little bit tricky because in some of my videos, I'm going to absolutely test this. I did a little testing on Galciv 4, but there's no dedicated servers for Galciv 4 on multiplayer. Essentially, you host the game on your machine, and then other people connect to you. And so you either need to do universal plug and play on your router, or you need to do like port forwarding. I'm not really willing to do either of those. I also, because of this, could not find any multiplayer games. So with that being said, I'm not going to... I think online functionality would probably work if there was a dedicated servers and people were connecting to those servers. But if I had someone else that could test this with me on, if I'm hosting locally, I would be glad to test that, but I don't really have a way to test that online functionality. But from what I could see, it was working. I could create my own lobby. I had no issues doing that. I just didn't see any games listed. So I'm going to put this one as not applicable. I'm actually not going to factor that in on the overall score for this specific title. The fifth criteria was controller, keyboard, mouse, and input. And I've essentially... Can you play this game with controller, keyboard, mouse? Are there any problems or anything like that? And I've already kind of talked about the experience that I had with the keyboard input, but after I got that resolved, it worked fine. I didn't have any issues. This is not a problem with the game itself. This is an issue with essentially how the Wayland display handles the keyboard input and how Proton essentially uses that. So there's a little bit of like compatibility issues there, I think, or maybe a bug. But it's not the game itself. But I'm going to again give this an overall score of a 7, the same as the installation startup for those same reasons. For 6, I chose graphics. Essentially, what type of display options do you give or anything like that, or do I have any issues? Let's kind of jump in here and look at the graphics for a moment. There's a few things I wanted to kind of go over on graphics and just talk about briefly. And I expect on some of these videos, graphics will be something that a lot of people care about, and so I will try to go in depth as much as possible and kind of go over these. So one great thing that I love about this game is it supports ultra widescreen. I play on an ultra widescreen, a 21:9, and I love it. If the game supports it, it's really, really nice. I can do 4x anti-aliasing, and it does full screen anti-aliasing. If you use ultra widescreen, however, it will not let you choose large UI scaling. So that's a little bit of a negative, but I also don't have an issue. It's not overly small. So here you have to, the game essentially tells you have to have 3840 by 2160 in order to have the UI scaling to be large. But I don't have a problem with medium. I think the game looks fine. You can kind of, like, if you go to new, you can see the UI scaling. It looks fine. I don't have an issue there. Let's see, where was... Oh, there. Let's see. So this is where I think I'm going to knock maybe a point off. So you can see in the top of the screen, I have the Steam display showing 125 frames per second. That is the frame cap lock of this game. It gives me a VSync option. So if I have a 60 hertz display and I use VSync, then the game locks at 60 frames per second. That helps with keeping video cards from overheating and things like that. That's really good. This game does not have a frame rate limiter. So if I don't want to use VSync, and I'm not, because my display actually, the hertz my monitor can display is actually higher than this. So if this game does not have a frame rate limiter, so essentially, unless you're willing to change the display refresh rate, and you have a decent card, it's going to be 125 frames per second. So you may hear your fans on your video card go a little higher. With that being said, I'm actually not going to count points off on this, because this doesn't play well on Linux. This is really more of a game feature, because the graphics play fine. I mean, it's a beautiful game. You can kind of see, the various textures and things like that. I mean, look at that's gorgeous. It plays just fine. The gameplay plays fine. So. And it has a solid frame rate. So I'm actually going to give that a 10 as well. I'm not going to count points off on the game not having a frame limiter, because that really has nothing to do with does it play well on the operating system. The last thing I'm going to talk about is audio, which is number 7. And essentially I'm just kind of using a 2.1 speaker system. I'm not using surround sound. I'm using the system config. I've got enable SFX, voiceovers and music enabled. I don't get any crackling or errors or anything like that. It uses, I think I have Pulse Audio installed on the latest version of Fedora 44. So I'm going to give this a 10 also. I have no issues with audio on 7. So overall, I think that this title, using Proton 10, works just fine. You may need to do just a little bit of tweaking. I know on Proton DB it has it set to gold, and I would kind of agree with that assessment, because I did have to do the no launcher option to get Proton 10 to register my keystrokes. But overall, I'm going to give this title a 9. I think that a solid 9 is really fair for the game, and I'm playing it just fine. I'm posting videos just fine without any problems whatsoever. So highly recommended to play on Linux, and I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I am. That being said, happy gaming. Take care.